Yes, we got interesting stuff this evening. So I'm Tom Bragg. I'm going to chair this evening's tour. Um, I'm just going to give an introduction now, and I'll do some stuff at the end. But first of all, some housekeeping, or I should say who I am, I suppose. So I'm a trustee of Cambridge Carbon Footprint, the charity that organises Open Eco Homes. Open Eco Homes is a project of Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and I've been doing quite a lot of work this year organising these online tours and talks. So welcome. So yes, housekeeping. So perhaps as you're doing nicely, most of the time, please stay muted so that we don't have too much background noise, but do unmute yourself when you need to talk. And we're going to have 2 questions and answer sessions when Matt will be looking for people with questions. So when you've got a question, please, can you write it in chat? If you're not familiar with Zoom chat, if you put your cursor near the bottom of your Zoom window, then you'll see a chat speech bubble symbol. Click on that, and then a box comes up, and you can just write messages in, including my question is whatever, and Matt will pick those out. Or you can put in, if you've got other problems or suggestions, ideas, whatever you need to tell us or other people here. And then can you, oh yeah, so the only other thing I got to say in housekeeping is that we're recording this session. Zoom lets us have a video recording so that we can share this evening's tour with other people afterwards, or people who've missed this talk. And but if you really don't want to be identified in that recording, then please can you write that in chat? In fact, you're probably seeing all these little windows for each person with names in them, but those names won't appear in our recording anyway. So don't worry about that. So, okay, so I'm excited about Zoe and Samin's tour they're about to give us. I've been to their home and I really love what you've done, and I'm keen to learn a bit more. So over to Zoe and Samin. You're unmute.
Okay, we're
Hi,
unmuted.
everybody.
Hello, everybody.
All right, we're Zoe and Samin, and we live in central Cambridge in a Victorian house which now has 21st century insulation. So Samin, if you could do the slide sharing. Yeah. Good. Okay, so hopefully you should all be able to see the first slide of our talk. Tom, can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Great. Okay. So shall I start then?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So there's 4 humans in our house. There's us 2, and then we've got 2 teenage children who are 14 and 16. And we've also got 2 cats and 3 chickens and a hamster. And we just wanted to talk about how we've eco-renovated our Victorian house to make it really comfortable and warm and just a joy to live in, really. So that's what we're going to be talking about. There's going to be a couple of opportunities during the talk for you to ask any questions. So if you just put them in the chat box, then Matt will be able to pick those up as we go along.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, good.
So the okay, so the talk's in let's go back up here. The talk's in 3 sections. There's an intro section which is quite short, and then the middle section is a bit more technical and goes into some aspects of eco renovation that probably you would be interested in. And finally, there's kind of a conclusion section where we kind of look back on things and see how they went. Okay, so intro. So you can see this is photos of the front, I was saying middle, but front, inside and back of our house as it was. So it's a Victorian terrace infill. It is when we moved in, it was a great family home. You know, large, lots of space, good sized garden near everything in central Cambridge. The only thing is it had the eco footprint and comfort of a Victorian home as well, Victorian house as well. So it was very, very cold in the winter, very hot in the summer. For instance, the loft had been converted into a bedroom, and there was a bathroom attached to it, but it was completely uninsulated, really, and you couldn't be there in the winter, and you couldn't be there in the summer because it was too hot. Most of our time was spent in this middle, in the picture shown, the photo in the middle of this slide. Most of our time, this is a big family room, the kitchen's on the right-hand side, and most of our time was spent here. And we essentially, after a couple of years, gave up on heating the house, and we bought a wood stove and installed it in this living room area. And we used the wood stove to heat ourselves in the winter.
So we'd moved in 2005 with a 1-year-old child, and then a year later we had another child. So actually, even though we were freezing in the winter and boiling in the summer, we didn't really have time to think about doing anything until probably 10 years later. So it was probably about 2015 we started actually doing the work to improve the house.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah, so Zoe said, I think 2014, yes, 2008 we moved in.
2005
we moved in. 2014, yeah, kind of really, we began thinking and kind of had the guts to begin thinking about what we wanted to do. I mean, the house was, you know, it had, for instance, it had double glazed windows, but they'd all gone. It was a Victorian house, solid brick walls, really, you know, even
dirt floor underneath.
Yeah. Even things that were new, so like the loft, they're practically uninsulated. So, you know, you could poke a hole in the lights in the roof, in the loft roof, and you'll just come out and hit the tile straight away. So what we did, we began attending open eco home events. We went to there was another thing called super homes. We went to those as well. Kind of inspired by that, and we decided to go with an architect for them to plan and project manage the thing. So we were very, very heavily involved, and we'd spoken to people who'd done things by themselves versus architects. Spoken to people who'd done things incrementally, so a bit at a time, versus the whole house kind of thing. We wanted the whole house fixed, I think, really. And we wanted somebody who knew what they were doing, because there's a lot of kind of information out there. There's a lot of detail that you have to get right. So we wanted somebody who knew what they were doing.
So I think that's why we chose AC, because we knew that they'd done a lot of different eco renovations already. And so they fully surveyed the house. And to begin with, we just said, oh yes, we want to have a properly insulated loft, and we need to fix the windows, and we want to do some wall insulation. And kind of from there, we realized, well, if you need to fix the windows, then you may as well upgrade your windows. So we went to triple glazed windows. And then if you're going to do loft insulation, then you may as well do floor insulation as well. And then once you get to digging up the floor, then we thought, well, we may as well.
Nothing's left really.
Yeah, then we thought we may as well just, you know, improve all the drains, because we had this terrible manhole in the kitchen, which was left over from when the house had been extended, we think in the 1980s. And they'd just left the drain inside, and they hadn't moved it outside. So there were lots of things like that that really needed improving.
Yeah. Yes. So AC kind of, so you said AC did a survey of the current house, because they wanted to understand what was in there. and then they wrote a spec that became the tender. And through that, we found our builders, RWD. They had worked with ACA4, which was a really good thing. And even better, they knew what they were doing. So they'd done a lot of eco renovation before. They knew about insulation, and they were really kind of, they were really just kind of enthusiastic about the whole thing.
Okay, so if we move to the next.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just show you a few of these slides. We're just on the next slide, we're going to show you a series of photos that kind of show the whole process, but you can just see a few things here about during this just construction. You can see that first of all, actually, there was a lot of destruction. Especially if you look at the middle photo, this is the same area of the back of the house that you saw on the first slide with the beautiful floorboards. That basically the back of the house doesn't exist anymore. So they took that. They took basically that, for a few months, every time we went there, the house was less than it was before. And then if you look on the right hand side, you could see more destruction there as well. So actually there was a lot of destruction before we started constructing again.
Okay, so this is kind of a zoomed out, I guess, a drone type of view of the destruction and some of the construction, I think. So maybe they go past very fast, these photos, but just maybe it'll bring up some question or comment in your mind when we go through that. Oops.
Oh, we make it, okay.
So these are all in time order of the front, middle, and back of the house. This is all the front. You see the old windows and the roof is going off.
And then at this point they put, oh, sorry, oh no, okay.
Just let it go.
Okay, sorry. So there's the solar cells going on
the front.
And then you could see the tiles are going on around the solar cells, so they didn't need tiles.
And these are new windows.
And that's the pink stuff is the insulation.
Insulation going on, yeah.
And then now it's rendered.
The render goes on top. And scaffolding finally comes down. That was a long time. That's the back of the house. Yeah.
And so you can see in these pictures, they're now building a new roof on top of the old roof. And there's more solar cells on the back.
And that's the windows and doors, new windows and doors going on.
And then the insulation again on the back. This is the inside. So more destruction.
That's the kitchen.
And then they're starting to construct again now. So you can see there's a new wall and roof.
The walls and
this is showing the inside with the floor insulation, and then it's nearly finished. And that's the new kitchen going in, and that's how it's finished. And then this is the front of the house.
And walls.
I think that's the last slide.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you're starting against me. Oh, okay, that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
You go then.
Okay, and then okay, and that's this is us now. So afterwards, what it looks like in the front and the back and the middle, the front, inside and back. I mean, it's people go past and say, "Oh, is that a new build?" It looks slightly different, but essentially the house's footprint and kind of
the layout
is still the same. I often say it's like kind of some kind of reverse, some opposite of plastic surgery. We have taken all the guts of the house out and put them back in. Yeah, so we moved back in actually in February 2018. It actually took a bit more time after that for the house to be completely finished, but we were inside and we were okay inside. The net result of the house afterwards is it's very warm, it's not cold. There's much more light in the house. There's no damp at all. Previously, there were parts of the house that were really quite unlivable because of the damp. We use all of the house all of the time now. So in particular, in the front, in the left-hand side photo, you can see where the bay window is. There's a front room there. That used to be cold and moldy, and now we use it properly now. Our bills have gone down. Heating bills have gone down. Certainly, we're generating. We get money back from the grid,
which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, we'll talk about later a bit. Yeah, and we've also gained space because of the things that were old, broken things that we've taken away, or how we used to heat the house and things like that. I think that's really,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the end of the first section. So if anybody wants to ask any questions now, Matt, are there any questions that people want to ask after the first section?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions coming through. Just say thanks for the first part. Very interesting. Just a reminder, everyone, please ask your questions. And then I think let's, for the first question, go to Nicole. So Nicole, if you could unmute yourself and ask the question that you asked in the chat earlier on.
Hi everyone. So one major difficulty seems to be trying to find a suitable builder. So can you describe your process and how you dealt with any problems that arose during the build?
So we had our architects drop a tender document, so the specifications of what we wanted done. And they suggested several builders who had done this kind of work before. And we knew several others who would be interested in this kind of work.
So we got tenders, I think, from there were three different builders we got tenders from. We decided to go with the builder we went with, RWD, because we knew that they'd worked with the architects before. But also because
they were slightly cheaper.
They were slightly cheaper than the other one, but also because the architects were project managing it for us. So then any issues were dealt with directly by them, which was a real advantage. I think I know people who've done it themselves, but we felt that was, and we think that was definitely the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to find a builder finding a builder is a big pain anyway, right? But also I think it's important to find a builder who knows what they're doing. So I think some of them might have a tendency to just bodge their way through it, but you can't really if you are, for instance, our builder kind of insisted on the installation going in after the windows had gone in, for instance, and because he knew how to lay on the insulation afterwards so that he could watch out for cold bridges and things like that. So only experience and wanting to do the right thing can that's his intention to do that. So I think finding the right builder is important, as you know. I think that's kind of the basis of your question. And yeah, we used our architect to point out several of them, and we knew some of them who would be interested as well.
Great, thanks for that. And that, just to confirm then, Dana, you had asked who the builder was. Just to confirm, it's RWD who did the build.
Yeah, so their site is on the leaflet, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the case study, which I have shared in chat, you should be able to download it in the early part of the chat.
The next question from Sue is around whether or not you're in a conservation area. I don't know, Sue, if you want to add anything else to your question or any broader context to that, feel free to unmute yourself if you do.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because we're we're at the end of Mill Road in Burnside, and we're in the conservation area. I mean, I know I can look into it all online, but I'm just wondering if that does have constraints, particularly on doing things like external insulation. Because if we were to do internal insulation, our rooms are tiny anyway, and we just lose so much.
Yeah.
I mean, we were really lucky in lots of ways because our house is an infill. It doesn't look like any of the other houses. So the fact that we raised the roof wasn't an issue for the council because our roof didn't match the roof line of the terrace anyway. But also our house was already rendered, so it was rendered afterwards too. So it didn't really look any different. So that wasn't really an issue for us. But I know people whose houses are brick, you can get external insulation that looks like brick. Look very nice, I don't think.
From afar, it looks like brick.
From far it looks okay. But so I think it probably depends exactly what your house is like and exactly where it is.
But so and we are in a conservation area, but the renovation of the house was never a problem. They went through planning. As soon as the planners got to it, they ticked it.
Dan, do you want to follow up with a question around planning, or did that answer the question you had? You'll need to unmute yourself if you want to ask a follow-on question.
Oh, so was that to me, Sue?
To Dan. Dan had asked a question around planning.
Yeah, evening everyone. Yeah, so yeah, it was really about the planning. I suppose, you know, planning can be a can of worms itself in every case. I just wondered if, I think you touched on a couple of points there, pre-rendered, so you know you're not, but you obviously had to go through some planning, and planning can be let's say a can of worms from my experience in Cambridge. So I was just interested, yeah, how you went through that, and yeah, if there was a story to be told there.
The only problem we had with planning was actually waiting for the inspector to come.
Yeah, it took quite a long time for them to actually come, but actually
as soon as he came, he said, "Oh, great, you're
so
doing this, great.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing this as well, great." So they were very happy with kind of what we were planning to do.
Yes.
Good. Hopefully that answered your question, Dan.
Great. Thank you.
And then Erica has a question on the PV, the electricity generation from your PV. Maybe it's probably best if you come back to that because I know you're going to cover more detail on that. So Erica will probably come back to that question because that could be covered off. Yeah. And then Dana, you have a question around the costs. Is there anything else you want to add to your question there around costs?
Good evening, everyone. It's mainly the construction cost of the remodeling. If our speakers are willing to share.
The leaflet, it's in the not leaflet, in
case study.
In the case study, I think it says something like 220,000.
All right. Is that your project cost overall? Is it, or is it the cost of the build?
Everything, yes.
That's the whole cost, yeah.
The whole cost. All right, that's great. Thank you very much for that.
But it also includes, you know, it's not just the cost of eco-renovating the house, because it also includes, we have to buy a new kitchen in the end, for instance, various things like that.
Yes, with fittings.
And all of those kind of things, so yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Great, and then we have another question here from Matthew on insulation. Matthew, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
After that too, we'll cover in the next section.
Yeah, we could go through it next.
Okay, so let's come back to that, and then Matthew, if there's anything else that you want to ask on the back of that, then feel free to do that.
So I think it's probably time to carry on now, and then we will have more questions fairly soon.
Okay, so if we go on to our next section then. So this section is a longer section. This is the technical details about the build. So, Samin, if you want to talk about the plans first of all.
Okay, so this is the ground floor. On the left is before, on the left is after.
The right is after.
So on the left is before and the right is after, sorry, yeah. I have two lefts, yeah. So the main thing, I mean, you know, I'm not expecting you to read all the labeled items here or anything like that. But the main thing to really know on the right-hand side, on the after, on the planned work plan diagram, is that the blue lines are, the blue and red lines are insulation. The blue ones are essentially slightly thicker, cheaper insulation. So on the bottom, you can see they're done externally in the front of the house, and then at the top you can see they're done externally on the back of the house. They're also used, thinner versions of them are also used inside the house itself. The red line, if you can see my mouse cursor, the red line, this is thinner, much more expensive aerogel internal insulation. This was used for non-party walls throughout the ground first and loft part of the house.
Because there was a lack of space there, so we had to use the aerogel.
Yeah, so that's the kitchen area, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, so now we'll show you pictures of the insulation. So you can see on the left, that's the Kingspan insulation, which we got. And on the right, you can see the guys putting it onto the front of the house. And so this is 110 millimeters thick above the damp proof course and 90 millimeters thick below that. And so again, for our house, we were really lucky because it's a setback terraced house. We could have that much insulation on the front and back of our house without without going onto the public highway, which obviously a lot of houses in the street wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah. The other one thing I forgot to mention actually on the previous slide was windows. So we'll talk about floor and windows just a bit briefly here. So the windows we all upgraded to triple glazed units. So we don't talk about that anymore after that. So you'll talk about this thing? Yeah,
I'll talk about this. So then this is on the left side here. You can see where there's a little staircase. That's the stairs going up to the loft. And that's actually a very, very narrow staircase anyway. So we had to have the aerogel there because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to get the staircase up to the loft. So this is what the aerogel looks like. And that's 39 millimeters thick. The stuff with the red dots in the middle is the damp-proof membrane that was installed by Anglia Property Preservation. And it's kind of this yellowy plastic stuff, but it's held in place by these red, well, nails essentially. I don't know what they are, but they hold it in place. So we had, it looked quite fancy actually. We had that all over the ground floor of the house for quite a while. It was quite nice. And then you can see that, so this is in our daughter's bedroom, the back bedroom. Here there's the Celotex 100 millimeters insulation in her room, which again was a non-party wall. So that's why we needed to have some internal insulation because because the house is set back, we didn't have party walls.
Okay, so that's the roof. Not much to say here. Similar type of diagram. Essentially, there was no insulation here, and now the entire roof is kind of packed. Completely sealed with insulation. And here you can see it. So our architect Anne was very, very excited that we were a setback terraced house because she said I can put insulation between the rafters as people normally do, but also I can put insulation on top of the rafters as well. So essentially we had, on the left you'll see kind of there's 50 mil insulation between the rafters. On the right, you can see on top of the roof itself, there's 80 mil of insulation going on top. So it's like an extra roof. And then of course, tiles went on top of that.
So the roof is I think the roof's another 150 millimeters higher than it was before, something like that, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, and this is the floor. So you can see, if you look in the second photo, the little photo, you can see how far down the builders actually dug, because you can see this is our staircase going from the ground floor to the first floor, and you can see that there's a huge gap, and this is already, they've put quite a lot of stuff back in. So during the destruction phase, when we wanted to go upstairs, we'd have to step up about a metre to go onto the stairs because it was so far.
So the house, kind of like all Cambridge houses, it just had an earth floor underneath the floorboards, so you could see the earth was there. And in fact, when they began digging out, they found that there was no damp proof or anything like that on the floor. So what went in the floor was a damp proof course, a concrete slab, 125 concrete slab. Then insulation,
which is this middle picture,
which is that one, and then screed on top of that, and there are heating pipes in that. So we lost the radiators on the ground floor, and then our old floorboards were put back on throughout the ground floor. That's the floor insulation, and just mentioning those floorboards. So everything we wanted to keep in the house was stored in the garden over the winter. Essentially, it was 6 months, starting from July well into kind of February time. And these were the floorboards. They were kept in the garden. a lot of white goods, all of our white goods. So fridge, washing machine, kitchen was all kept in the garden. The kitchen didn't survive.
But everything else
did. When the floorboards were laid back again, they were laid throughout the house, and then our wood burner kind of did a lot of work for several days, just burning intensely to dry them out.
Okay, so then if you look, this is the PV system. So yes, when we first moved into the house, so probably kind of 2006, 2007, something like that, we looked into getting solar PV because we thought that would be a quick win for us. And at that time, someone came to the house and they said, "Oh, that's no good. Your house is east-west facing. You're never going to be able to generate enough." So we kind of thought, "Oh, well, maybe we won't be able to have that." But actually now, firstly, solar cells are much cheaper, but also they're much better quality than they used to be. And actually, we've got a 4 kilowatt array made by SunPower. There's 6 on the back of the house, 6 on the front of the house. So obviously in the morning, the ones in the back east facing, they generate the most electricity. In the afternoon, then the ones in the west generate the most electricity. And I think you saw in the video earlier that the solar cells were fixed straight onto the roof, and then the tiles were placed around them.
So it's completely flush.
So it's completely flush. So it looks, it looks pretty good actually on there. So then this is how it works.
Well, this is what we do with it.
This is what we do with it. Yeah, you can say this. Oh, right, I'll say so. So you can see there's my picture here of solar cells, and this is so solar cells generate DC direct current, but obviously in the house we need to use AC. So we have this converter which converts it from DC to AC. So the first thing that happens to any electricity we generate is it goes to the house for any demand that we have, and then the second thing is that we have this enormous hot water tank which is 300 litres.
300
yeah,
litres, it's 2 metre tall.
It's an enormous hot water tank, which was interesting because they had to find somewhere to put it, and in fact had to end up moving the downstairs toilet forward so that we could put the water tank under the stairs, because that was the only place that it could go, and it had to be vertical. So that heats up all our hot water, and as we've got 2 teenage children, it's really useful that we've got a lot of hot water so that we can all get enough for a shower. And then lastly, once the water reaches temperature and there's no more demand from the house, then it goes back out to the grid. And Samin's made a graph here you can see of the FIT payments that we get each quarter, and obviously over the summer period we get more, but even in the winter we get a reasonable amount. And so the last year I calculated we got £211 back from the grid. So
I think for us personally, it wasn't, the PV system was never for FIT payments or anything, getting payment back.
It was about being able to generate our own electricity, being independent. You can talk about the heating.
Okay, so the heating system, so we have a gas boiler. It sits near the roof of our downstairs. It's just a place to put it. So that in conjunction with electricity that powers the immersion heater in the hot water tank, that's in the middle of the picture here, it's going in. So that heats the hot water, and then that goes into, providing hot water and heating for the house. So this is quite a nice system. Our architect was, Anne was quite, she'd installed it in some previous houses already. Honeywell Evo Home, the controller's on the top left in the top right photo there. And it's quite good because you can just retrofit. So these are just our old radiators on the first floor in the loft. Just fit these radio controlled thermostats on them, and the controller just talks to them via radio. So it's a kind of quite a neat system. And
it's a really good system.
Yeah, you can control, you can set up zones for rooms, and you can control timings and temperatures for all those things.
Okay, so that's the end of the technical section. So are there any questions, Matt?
Sure, yeah. Just to encourage everyone to keep asking their questions in the chat. But to start off, well, first off, hopefully, Erica, your question was answered there around the PV electricity generation. But feel free to ask a follow-up question if it wasn't.
No, that was perfect. It's exactly our situation. It was a really helpful answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Fantastic. And then there's a question from Norman. Norman, do you want to ask your question around moving out?
I think you nearly answered it before. But how long did you move out for?
We were planning to move out for 6 months. but then it was, so actually there's one slide, the next slide will answer some of that question. So we were planning to move out for 6 months initially. I think the plan was 7 months. It took a bit longer than that.
So it was 8 months. It was 8 months because we were in a rental property, which initially was 6 months, but then we had to break it up, like give them a month's notice. So we said it was difficult to work it out. We said, right, okay, we're going to move out on the 22nd of February or whatever it was. So then they kind of knew that they had to finish the painting. They were finishing the painting on the morning that we were moving back in.
So we moved out.
But it was 8 months.
Yeah,
yes.
So we moved out in end of June.
The 1st of July, something like that.
Moved back in February, but the work wasn't finished in February. So it was April when the work was finished.
Well, the internal work.
Yeah. So 6 months.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Then Dana, you had a question there around, I mean, the question is, are you fully off grid? I don't know if you want to expand on that or kind of ask anything further.
No, we're not, no. But we use, our energy comes from a supply called Bulb, and so all of their electricity is renewable, and I think all of the gas is renewable, or most of the gas is renewable from them. Yes.
May I ask, elaborate a bit more on that, on my question, and ask whether you are able to quantify from your electricity requirements as a household over a year, how much are the PVs providing you with in terms of percent? Is it something that you calculated or measured?
Yeah. So what I can tell you. Yeah, so I think, if you go back to, so what I can tell you is, this one? Yes, yeah. So what I can tell you is, we know this number 3, because that's where the FIT payments come in. What we do know, for instance, about 3 is that we are exporting nearly as much as we use, as our actual bill comes to for electricity. So nearly as much kilowatt hours as we use, we export. And it's around, whatever it was, like 1,400 or something like that.
Yes, it was. Yeah, so we were thinking that we could possibly, if we didn't export and we had a better way of storing the electricity, then possibly we would be able to. We could be off grid. Yes. Yes. So
Zoe wants to calculate. So actually, the 1, 2, 3 here actually is relevant because the PVs first feed into the house, and if there's no demand for the house, then they heat the water. And if the water is heated enough, then it goes out. So actually, we use as much as we can to begin with before it goes out.
But then, of course, if we're generating in the middle of the day and we're not there, then that's when we, so that's why. So we're thinking about getting a battery anyway. And we didn't initially because they were really expensive, but we think we might do that in order to then kind of, instead of getting the money back and then spending the money, we could maybe just keep it ourselves. So, but so that's kind of in process at the moment. We're thinking about that.
Great, thank you.
And there's a question from Colin and Sandra around heating systems that I'm also personally interested to know the answer to. Colin and Sandra, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, it's just a question really, based on the taking into consideration what's the term, fuels? Fossil fuels. Bearing in mind the trend towards electricity for the future, could you have done without the gas boiler?
Good question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we thought about that afterwards. I thought, should we just try not to get a gas boiler at all? It's mainly cooking actually at this point.
It's mainly cooking that we use. So yes, I suppose we could have but we've always liked having a gas cooker, a gas hob. We have an electric oven. So but I think also as well, because if you can get renewable gas, then that's not so much of an issue perhaps. I don't know, but then they've said that gas boiler is going to be phased out by 2025 or something. So we might be stuck then with
Perhaps if you get the battery, that will help you out in that respect.
Yeah, that will. And then I suppose then we can change our hob over, so then we should be fine.
I think a price, I mean, it's not a big point, but price is, gas is still much cheaper than electricity. So heating water is still but that shouldn't really be a consideration, or it should be a small consideration if you're trying to eco-renovate your house, I think.
Yes, but yes, and the other things we thought of as well. There were they can get systems where you can use wood-burning stoves to heat your water for you. That wouldn't help with the cooking, but any extra water heating we need to do, we could have done a thing where we used our wood-burning stove, but that was something we didn't really go down. But that is a possibility apparently as well.
Yeah.
Like having an Arga, I suppose. People who have an Arga, they use that, and then obviously you'd use renewable fuel for that.
Yeah, I think afterwards we thought, was the boiler necessary at all? I think right now it's very convenient to use gas, but
just an aside, you can get electric Argas, I believe. So.
Oh right, oh okay. Electric Argas, wow.
What next? Nuclear powered Argas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just while we're on the topic of heating systems, and Sue's also asked, did you consider a heat pump system? I don't know if you want to add to that question, Sue, or if the discussion is kind of, if there's anything else you want to say, and feel free to unmute and ask it.
Okay, I think I actually mean heat exchange. It's I've started looking into it where you have wires and things that either go down into the ground or go along under your garden. I think it doesn't perhaps work with the size of plot that we all have.
Yeah, I think we did look at it very briefly, but I think by this time we were just kind of up to here with lots of things, and we didn't go far with that. But it's also something you could retrofit on as well. I think you could do, it's something you could do afterwards. One kind of big thing we had was how to plan everything so that
it happened in the right order.
Everything happened in the right order, and we wanted, and most of the things that we wanted done were done in that order. And something like a ground source pump, for instance, could be done afterwards.
Yes, and we know people who had one, and they thought it was really good. But yes, but I don't know about whether just because our plots are so small, as you said, Sue, I don't know whether it would be viable here. Yes.
Yes. So can I say, in general,
yes,
you need about 1.5 times your house floor area to dig up for a ground source heat pump, unless it's a borehole.
That's quite a big area then.
It's big, but of course a lot of people use air source heat pumps. That's another alternative.
And there are 1 or 2 questions coming in around ventilation. So Dana, do you want to unmute and just ask your question around ventilation? And I think that might answer Rachel's question as well.
Sure. So I was wondering, with such airtightness achieved with the insulation and membranes and the like, do you know what the air leakage or air infiltration rate of the house is currently, and whether you needed to install mechanical ventilation? Because obviously highly airtight houses do not work on their own. They need controlled ventilation.
Yeah, so we have above all of the windows and doors, we have little
trickle
vents. Yes, trickle vents. So we have them open all the time. And actually, because of the wood burning stove, we have to be particularly careful about that. We need to make sure that we've got sufficient ventilation for the wood burner to work properly. Yeah.
Not that we use it anymore.
Not that we use it much anymore, but it's mostly for decoration. But yes, so we have the trickle vents, and actually generally it's so warm that we generally have at least one window open at some point somewhere, because it is so lovely and warm in the house.
Yeah. Yes. And inside the house there's no, it's a very ground downstairs, very open plan, and there's no part of the house which can be sealed inside. So the doors all have massive gaps underneath them and things like that, and doors are always open, so air circulates around the house by itself, but and then of course there's the trickle vents which are always open.
Sorry, can I add also, have you had an air tightness test done on your house out of interest?
No, I haven't, but it would be interesting to do that.
Yes, it would be,
okay. Thank
Tom,
you.
do you want to, should we keep going?
Yes, just a little more before the conclusions.
Okay, we'll take another question then. And since we're on you had actually asked a question
Oh,
around
okay.
reusing building materials. So
Yeah.
do you want to?
So I was just wondering, I saw in the code study that you'd been reusing building materials. So did that work out okay?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were things that we couldn't reuse. I mean, amazingly, certain things survived, like the shower tray in the loft. I never thought that was going to survive, but it did. Whereas the downstairs toilet, they took it out and it fell apart, so we had to get a new toilet. But all the floorboards survived. As we said, the kitchen cabinets didn't survive, but they were probably more than 20 years old anyway. So, you know, they're probably the end of their life. And we thought initially we might reuse the tiles, didn't we? But then we decided against it because because the tiles were different, and we wanted to make sure we wanted the tiles to all be the same.
But they come from recycled slate.
But they're recycled, yeah, they're recycled building materials anyway. So we did, we felt quite satisfied that we'd reused as much as we could.
Yeah. Okay. Should we take one more question?
Yes, one more quick one, and then we need to conclude.
So there's one from Jacob. Sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong there. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? We can't hear you if you're talking.
No.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, have you noticed? Were you looking at the boiler? How often is it heating the storage? How is it called?
The immersion. How much the immersion heater is being used, or?
No, not the immersion. The boiler itself. How much you are using the gas to heat the water in the storage?
Much less than before. I can dig out the numbers, but our gas bill has gone down.
Even though we're actually heating the house.
We're heating more of that. We're actually, yes. So that's interesting. Essentially, kind of the base has changed a bit because we're heating more of the house now, in a way more of the time, because we're using more of the house. So I was expecting our heating bills to go up, and our kids are slightly older, so they're showering more, for instance. But despite that, our gas consumption has gone down. I can maybe it's a question. I can find the numbers afterwards, but our gas consumption's definitely gone down.
Great. Should we move on, Tom?
Yes, I think we need to carry on now.
Okay, so the last part then is our conclusion.
Couple of slides.
So, Samin, you can talk about what went wrong.
Okay, so what went wrong? Three things went wrong. Three things went wrong, yes. And I think especially when you're digging up poking holes into a Victorian house, you should expect something to go wrong. But actually, it wasn't really related to the Victorian house part of it, in fact. So the first thing on the photo on the left, when the builders began digging up the ground, they discovered that there was a reinforced concrete slab throughout the right-hand side of the house and on parts of the left-hand side of the house.
And that was from when the house had been modernized. And so the part on the right-hand side where you could see the rubble on the left, that was a passageway through to the back of the house, which was then converted into a downstairs bathroom and part of the kitchen. So that was done in the 90s, yes.
Yeah, and the other part was when the house was extended, again, much before us, and there was a reinforced concrete slab there holding the wall up. So they came across this and they said, we're going to carry on, and we said, yep, carry on. So they had to bring in
pneumatic
drills to drill this out. It added a month to the plan, and of course to the cost as well. And they couldn't work. So partly the time was because they couldn't work
for more than a few hours
each day, because I mean there was a lot of noise and a lot of vibration and various things like that. So they had to kind of have short days on those days. So that was one thing that went wrong, added time and cost to the project. The second thing that went wrong, photo in the middle, you can see all the new triple glazed windows are in, and the door is in, except for the bay window. So when the windows were measured and they arrived. The bay window turned out to be the wrong size. They'd taken the inside measurement of the outside one. No, the outside one. The outside one to be the inside one.
Something like that.
So it was just too big, essentially. They tried to ram it in and it wouldn't work. And so it had to go back to the factory, and they had to make a new one, essentially. So that we were waiting on that. The consequence of that was that because the insulation was going to go in after the windows, and the insulation needed the scaffolding, and all the utility work, so bringing out the meters and the new water pipe that was going to go in to allow for high pressure system throughout the house. All of that got delayed because none of those people, no utility people work underneath scaffolding. So they all had to wait. All of that part was kind of, just lagged and delayed because of that. So that's the second thing. So the window going wrong was the second thing. The third thing that went wrong was we came in one day just to have a look at the house.
No, we were living there at the time.
Oh, we were actually.
We were living there.
Yes, yeah. And the installation arrived. And we said, oh, great, the external installations arrived. Actually, there's a problem with that anyway, wasn't it? Because the reason there was a delay with the installation arriving anyway, because so this actually part of the story, I suppose, anyway. So the installation arrived, and
they started putting
up. They covered the back completely, and this is where they got to in the front when our architect arrived. And she said, why are you putting this insulation on? And
it's not the right one.
It's not the right one. This is just some
it's polystyrene
insulation. It had, I'm not sure, it had half the UV
U value.
Half the U value, twice the U value. Yes, twice the U value of the one the architect had specified. Anyway, so they stopped. She got them to stop, and
they took it off.
It was on for a while, actually, wasn't it, before the new one arrived. So the one she had specified was K5 insulation, and we're kind of bit of victims of other global events at that point, when, because of Grenfell, it was a very similar insulation to Grenfell, and when the builders asked for that type of insulation material, everyone denied that they ever did any insulation like that. And they never produced anything like that, etc., etc.
And so it was really difficult to buy.
Yeah. So we kind of eventually, our small order got tacked on behind a big order in some factory somewhere, and the right one arrived. So it's kind of a delay because the wrong installation had come, and then we had to wait for the right one.
Yes.
So those are kind of things that went wrong. What went right? Otherwise, you could do that one, Zoe.
Oh, I'll do the what went right. Well, you could see there's me standing in the house. That's the day we moved, or it might have been a week before. So it might have been a week before we moved back in. So you can see everything's nearly there. But as soon as we moved in just about the time when there was the Beast from the East was in Cambridge. I don't know whether you remember that time, and it was freezing for a couple of weeks, and there was a lot of snow. But inside the house it was really warm, and we didn't even need to light the stove, and we just needed to wear our t-shirts inside. So immediately we realized how warm it was, how light it was in the house, although it was quite blue in the downstairs room to begin with, because you can see the tarpaulin still on here because they hadn't finished the roof, because they hadn't finished the insulation, because the builders didn't want, that was another thing actually, the builders didn't want the insulation guys to walk over their nice new tiles, so they didn't put the tiles on until the insulation was on. So that's why that was there. But anyway, it was really warm. One thing we didn't really think about was that it was incredibly quiet, because the house is triple glazed. It's unbelievably quiet inside, because our street's quite a busy street, but you don't notice at all. So it's we don't spend much money on our bills. And I mean, a really great thing was that we moved house twice in 8 months. So we threw away loads of things. So that was really good. We went to the charity shop so many times. And actually, interestingly, the thing that people most comment on is our semi-vertical bike rack, which you can see on the bottom right photo there. That is the most commented on thing. People they say, oh, you live in that new build. So everybody thinks it's a new house, which it kind of is, but it's still the same house. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it.
I think after this too, I think it's into the bottom right photo of the bike rack. It's kind of another interesting thing that comes about, because we had our architect to work with, and they have thought about a lot of things and had experience with these kind of things. So, for instance, the bike rack went there because she insisted on a roof for the front door, and so while they were doing a roof for the front door, they could extend it out and then do a roof for the bikes as well.
But also because the children were getting bigger as well, we could no longer put their bikes in between the wall and the house because there wasn't enough space anymore. So we needed to have another way of storing the bike. But also, I mean, like this window, we would never have had a window by the front door. But they convinced us to do it. And it's so amazing because the hall is so light now. Just those kind of things we'd never really think of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay, I think that's it.
Let's go to the thanks slide. Yeah. So there's a thank you slide to Anne Cooper and Jake Wybransky at AC Architects. If you go to the AC Architects page, we've actually got our house is one of theirs. You could see more photos from inside the house. And then the RWG builders is Steve, Kelvin, Dan, Andy Hayden, and Alex, who were amazing and really, really good to work with.
Yeah.
Yes, so thanks
Cool.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions, people?
So I think it's conclusion time now, but we could have a few more questions after we've done the main finish. Maybe you can unshare your screen.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Zoe and Samin. I've got so many fresh ideas from what you've shown us. It's been a real pleasure and lovely way that you've shown us. Thank you. I've got a few more things to share in closing up, but first of all, I'm going to run a poll. So I'm launching a poll now. This is just to see your feeling about this tour. Has this tour made you more likely to create an eco home? You can just respond to that, and that gives us a feel for how much impact we're getting. But quite a few people are saying, I already have an eco home.
Excellent. Well,
really good too. I'll give you maybe 10 seconds more to take this decision. Thanks a lot.
Oh, we can't do it.
No, we can't do it because we already have an eco home. Oh, are we muted now?
And so, okay, I'm ending the polling and I'm sharing the results with you. And so, as I hope you can see, the huge majority of people said, yes, this tour has made it more likely for you to create an eco home. So I think that's showing it's been really well worthwhile having this tour. Now I'm just going to share a screen. And so here are just a few finishing up things. So other things that are going to be happening, you can see that we've got 4 sessions of thermal imaging training coming up this winter. And if you come to one of these, we will show you how to use our cameras and to interpret their images. And so then you can check out where your home is leaking heat. And I thought this might be interesting. People are asking quite a lot about the PV. And so maybe you don't know yet, there is a new scheme in Cambridgeshire run by the County Council together with Solar Together. And so this is a group buying scheme to get solar panels, and you can have a battery as well if you choose. I've signed up to this because I think it's worthwhile, and we're looking at having some solar. And so when you've registered, all those, and over 1,000 people have, all those bits of information will go into an auction, first one on October the 6th, where they will find out the lowest cost provider so we should get lower cost solar panels from that. And so here's a bit of information you have a look on at the autumn season, of course, for more tours and talks. there seems to be quite a lot of interest in heat pumps, and we've got a talk in October about heat pumps. So check that out. So please, can you write any other feedback in chat? What did you enjoy this evening? And also, it'd be really useful, have you got suggestions for improvements so we can make this kind of talk even better? And so I'm appealing for donations. So as I said, Cambridge Carbon Footprint is a charity running these things, and we depend on our fundraising to be able to do more like this. So thanks if you can donate, there's a link. And so tomorrow I'm hoping that I will circulate you and everyone who booked for this tour with the video that we've been recording now, so you can check out anything afterwards. And also the chat that's been going on, we'll see if we can answer any other questions that were still outstanding in the chat. So it's now about 8 o'clock. So this is the kind of official end to the session, but we'll stay around a little bit longer. If you want to still ask questions or share your experience, we are here. So feel free either to leave or stop around if you're still interested in more discussion.
Great. Should we go to some of the questions?
Yeah, sure.
So there's one we didn't answer from earlier from Robert. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask if you're still there? Yeah, I see you are.
Unmute us again so we can unmute. Oh, we are. Okay.
You still muted, Robert? So it's a question around partially insulating the house, and is it worth partially insulating? I'm assuming they're having some issues unmuting there. So I don't know if you want to answer that.
So we actually, well, yeah, so maybe we're not the right people to ask, because we went for full installation of everything to the extent of digging out the floors as well. I think it's still worth partially insulating the house because then, in fact, we saw a house in Royston, which was partially insulated. A couple of years ago, we saw it because they couldn't do all of it. I think it is. I suppose you have to watch out for cold bridges.
Yeah, that's the issue. Yeah.
So you probably have to know what you're doing and allow ventilation through those parts so that you don't get build-up of any kind.
Mm. But I suppose, yes, I suppose in terms of kind of doing a bit, then doing a bit more, then doing a bit more, then it's probably worth it.
In terms of, I suppose, incrementally doing it. I suppose it depends what the question is. Is it incrementally doing the work until you're completely insulated? Or is it, oh, I can only insulate a part of my house ever?
Mm.
It was me actually that was asking the question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. It's just that I live in a listed house in the conservation area. It's just a Victorian terrace like yours, but I don't think I'm going to be allowed to do what you do, and I'm not sure it would be appropriate anyway, because you know the front will certainly have to stay as it is. So I just wonder whether it's worth insulating what I am allowed to insulate. Would it actually be worthwhile, or will all the heat escape through the bits that haven't been insulated? So
but I suppose you need to consult somebody who's more of an expert, probably.
Yeah.
Can I make a general comment on that though? So this is the kind of situation that my wife Anne and I are in. We have a terraced house in a conservation area, and in fact we have now engaged a builder who we trust, who is going to insulate external wall insulation mainly at the back of the house, where we have got planning permission. As you say, I'm sure we wouldn't have permission to externally insulate the front of the house because the whole terrace has a good look there. And so we're doing that at this stage, and we do hope later to internally insulate the front of the house. We're just taking it a step at a time.
So you think it will be worthwhile doing, obviously?
Yes.
Yeah. It's going to save some heat escaping and
the coldest house in the coldest rooms in the house are at the back at the moment because they have more external walls, and so they're good ones to tackle.
Right, thank you.
There's a question from Nicole on performance during the recent heat wave, but
Yeah.
I think Nicole's dropped off. I can't see Nicole anymore on the call.
Yeah.
Do you want to have a quick comment on that? Just I'd be interested to know as well.
You do notice, like if you go up into the loft when the weather is very hot, it is warmer inside the house. But certainly if you've been out on the street, certainly in the afternoon, it's really hot on the street, and then you come in, it's really nice and cool inside the house. So it works pretty well. I would say it works pretty well.
I think it actually works better in the winter. So it is warmer in the house in winter, and it's cool in the house in the summer, but maybe not as cool as
it's warm in the winter. Yeah, that's probably true. But then also probably in the summer we have the windows open, so then we don't give the house its chance to, I suppose, to perform as well as it can do. Yeah.
Great. Rachel, do you want to ask your question around building materials?
Yeah, I just wondered where you got the recycled slate tiles, and if there's somewhere you can source recycled building materials.
Yes, I don't know where
slate tiles came from. I'll have to look it up where it came from. It's some company based in Wales somewhere, I think. The architect knew about them. She said they, it was the recycled nature and the kind of how they changed color once they were put on, kind of attracted her to them. So I think that was.
That was the only thing that we bought.
Yeah, that was the thing that was bought.
Because all the other things were recycled from the house already.
Were our things anyway.
Yeah. And there's a place, I can't remember the name, if anybody else knows the name. There's a place by the A11, Great Abington, that does recycled building materials, but I can't think of the name of it now.
I fear they've shut now, unfortunately.
Oh, have they?
I know the place you mean, but I've heard they've shut.
Well, if anybody else knows, please put in the chat.
Yes.
What kind of thing are you looking for?
So we're just about to begin our renovation project. So I think we've got a little bit of dormer extension, but I don't like insulation. I was just wondering, whether, I've heard of Kingspan and you mentioned aerogel, but I was just wondering maybe if there was some sustainably sourced insulation. I don't know.
I think Joan, if you're here, you can talk about your insulation with your sheep's wool. No, she's there.
Yeah. So actually, Rachel, I had a discussion with our architect, because I said, we're buying all this essentially petroleum-based insulation. We're putting concrete in. Here comes Joan. And we're putting concrete in. Can we not get something more natural instead? And she said, what we're doing with your house is that we're completely sealing it up. And afterwards you can ask what happened to it. But right now we're using what we can to seal it up. And I think in our situation, that's probably the right thing to do. But I think if you have more space, for instance, then there are other natural materials you could use. But then that becomes a different type of house. The type of house we have right now doesn't breathe anymore. If you want a house that breathes, then you might want to think about natural material instead.
Anyway, Joan's here now.
Yep, hello. Well, the house, we built a house from scratch and we wanted to go for natural materials, and it's not really the situation you have if you're renovating a house. We use something called foam glass in the floor, which is quite expensive, but it does mean that you don't need much of a screed because it's very strong. So if you look up I think it's called Prehensile. Do you remember? Yeah. Prehensile blocks. We use those in the foundations because they're very strong and they're very insulating. So if you're doing an extension of any sort, it's probably worth looking at that. I mean, our house is actually made of hempcrete, so it's a timber frame with wood wall board on the inside, and hempcrete is a lime and hemp mixture, which sort of goes hard and is supposed to be carbon carbon negative because it absorbs carbon dioxide as it hardens. So that it would be possible to, if you have got a really old building and you want to line the inside with something natural, you could put up a timber frame and use hempcrete on the inside, but it would be a lovely messy job.
Thanks, Jane.
I think that's all the questions, because there was another one from Dana on the contract, which you answered in the chat. And there was also one on the window measurements, which you also answered in the chat. So I don't see any other outstanding ones. I mean, feel free to unmute and ask any further questions if they're not reflected in the chat.
And the only people who, just to mention this, kind of the only people who were very concerned about our contract were our insurance company. I had so many kind of calls from them all the time saying, will there be a naked flame there? Who's living there? What contents will you have there? And it took a long time for them to be convinced that they could carry on insuring like the ground and the structure without insuring the contents. Interestingly, some things that they questioned about the insurance were actually right, in the sense that our architect had an old process for doing something that the insurance people questioned, and they went back and they fixed their process to do that. So everyone won, but there was a lot of hassle in between, and I was kind of the person in between getting it, from both, trying to pass it on to both sides. But otherwise, the contract with the builder was a pretty standard one.
Could I just ask a question about photovoltaics?
Sure.
Yeah.
You had it instead of your roof tiles.
No, the roof tiles are still there. Yes, in parts where they are there are no roof tiles.
How difficult is that?
It's really easy. It's a really nice system. So the roof was put on, and then the photovoltaics come in a tray. So the system comes in a tray, and the photovoltaics are on that. And when they put it on, they put the tray on. It's just slightly underneath where the tiles will be, and so the whole thing is really flush. It turned out to be. I wasn't expecting it like that, but it turned out to be a really, really nice system.
Thank you.
When you're saying nice system, are there any advantages outside the nice look?
Any advantages or?
Yes, are there any additional advantages of this system when you put the PV cells on the roof, not on the tiles, except for the looks?
You don't get pigeons nesting under them, I guess. That's always an issue.
And I've heard one of the advantages is that there is less wind loading on the roof. So when they're flush, they're just like tiles, whereas the solar panels that are above the roof are actually quite a structural problem because of the wind loading they get.
And I guess less shading as well from the panels next to them, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So I think we've had a great session there. I think we're coming to an end, and so thanks again, Zoe and Samin, and thank you for everyone else for coming in and participating, and do come and join in any of these other tours and talks. So thanks a lot. Bye bye.